Hello and welcome back to another episode of Mac and D. I got Jimmy D on the mic. How you doing, James?
I'm doing well. How are you today, buddy?
Oh, just amazing. I'm doing even better because we also have another repeat guest today. We got Jake Zahn. How you doing, Jake?
Doing well, doing well. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Absolutely. I loved when you texted me a couple weeks ago and you were like, I have no clue what is going on. And you just joined a new Dynasty League, new to you, but I'm also in the league. And it kind of just got sprung on you. And you were taking over for another team that was in the league, a guy who basically just crashed out and was like, hey, I don't want to do this anymore, which is valid. If you don't want to do it anymore, you got to do what you got to do. And you just got sprung onto a new team, which is a very random, weird thing to have happen. I think we've all been there at least at some point in our lives. Looking at your team, what was your initial thought looking at your squad?
It was a little surprising. Guy had five quarterbacks, which was fine. None of them were exactly top tier by any means in terms of fantasy production. And then also the thing that was very surprising to me, I think he at the time had four wide receivers and five tight ends. And I was just like, I don't really know what this guy's plan was. To be fair, his tight end, the top one was Trey McBride, so that's pretty good. You know, but his wide receivers were like JMO, Cortland Sutton, and I think JSN. And like that's pretty good, but I think it has like two flex and were tight ends in there. And I was like, I don't know about that. And then the running back situation wasn't very good either. I think at the time my best running back was probably James or David Montgomery. And that was about in terms of like good running backs. Maybe Tajay Spears was the next one. That's not great.
Exactly. So yeah, I mean, I think we all had the same reaction. I also sent your roster to James. I kind of sent the parameters so that we could start dissecting this team. Sounds like you were just immediately like, shoot, I'm kind of fucked. Like this roster is not great. It's not a good time. I have a lot of retooling and fixing up. James, you looked at his roster initially. What were your immediate thoughts looking at it?
I feel worse for Jake now, knowing that he's already even done some trades to make it better. Because my knee jerk was just like, what is going on here? To his point, I'm looking at four tight ends, not five. Where I'm just like, what are we doing? A three wide receiver league where, to your point, he only had four receivers or three receivers on the entire roster. Like a lot of head scratchers. My note was basically build. I think you're gonna have to take a couple lumps here for a season or two. But there's some pieces that are definitely tradable. You're just gonna have to start stacking some draft picks because this is old dudes that aren't even really winning now. Old dudes.
Exactly. And to level set with the audience, this was a league where I was in the Dynasty startup, the very, very first draft. I think it was back in 2018 was the first year. I remember being at Buffalo Wild Wings doing the draft. And I think I drafted like Odell Beckham third overall. And there's rumors of him retiring right now, which is just kind of funny. And it's a 10-team league. So you're gonna have pretty deep rosters just by virtue of that. It's one quarterback in the starting position, two running backs, three wide receivers, one tight end, two flex, 12 bench, very deep bench with 12 players. And then we added an IR spot a little while ago. So notably, no defense. So don't have to talk about that. No kickers either. So we don't have to talk about that either. And yeah, I mean, we can go ahead and just start dissecting this. We have a variety of recommendations that we already wrote down, Jake. I don't expect you to take every bit of advice. And also, as someone who's competing against you, I hope you don't take every bit of advice. But I think we have some pretty solid recommendations just right off the bat. Let's kind of go position group by position group, starting with the quarterbacks. Jake, what's your thoughts going forward for this year and into the future with your QBs?
Yeah, that was kind of my thing. Was kind of like James said, moving forward. I mean, not going to be competitive probably for at least another year or two. And so one of the things I did do was I moved Justin Herbert in order to get some draft compensation. And that was one of the ones that the guy I traded with was either interested in Herbert or Jordan Love. And either one, I was like, I'm fine with moving off either one of them more than anything because I do have some young quarterbacks that show some promise and then some that could be something. I got Michael Penix. And then the one that really is interesting is JJ McCarthy because obviously he can do a little bit of running. So, but completely unproven. And then also Sam Darnold. So, you know,
Yeah, you're kind of in an unenviable position where you have some of the young quarterbacks, but they're not the proven ones, right? JJ McCarthy and Michael Penix. And then you also have a couple of quarterbacks that they need to be in the top 10 in order for you to be competitive, right? It's a 10 quarterback league. If they're not a top 10 quarterback, they're not worth holding on to. I think the trade away of Justin Herbert is smart for exactly that. For fantasy right now, he's simply just on the edge of the being in that top 10. You might as well just kind of stream with Jordan Love and Sam Darnold in the short term and then see which of those quarterbacks ends up being decent in the long term. James, do you think there's an opportunity to kind of consolidate on quarterback power, or do you think that you kind of just run it out in the long haul and just see what ends up happening?
Right. Well, I mean, the knee jerk, I guess, would be without this being a two quarterback league, you're fortunate because the quarterback career is nowhere near as high with these guys that are would be just a ton of QB2s that have potential. But the sad part is it's not a two QB league, so sitting on four quarterbacks just doesn't help you. If you can find someone willing to take one more of these guys, that would be huge. Otherwise, I'm perfectly happy to just roll with Jordan Love and then like Penix or Darnold, like whoever you prefer, and then just see what McCarthy turns into. But there are three guys that are the for sure starters right now in Love, Darnold, and Penix. I mean, I know they've said McCarthy's going to start, but hasn't proven anything at all. It's like pick your favorite, see if anyone wants else. If not, I mean, in a 10-man league, oh goodness.
I don't know, it's crafting out. Sorry, guys.
Yeah. How much of that did you miss?
I got the gist of it. And no, James, I think you're right, though, about the quarterback situation. There's a surprising amount of teams in our league, not to kind of make it more macro than it needs to be, but there's a surprising amount of teams in our league that need a quarterback and would trade for one. Case in point, I just traded Drake May away for a first round pick in 2026. So, like, there is a pretty good demand for quarterbacks that aren't even in that top 10, just out of scarcity for some of the teams. And there's been a couple of teams that have been hoarding quarterbacks. So, there is a bit of a demand for it
Buddy,
as of
you're
right now.
going to be dreading that trade. I don't know if you've seen the Drake May camp film right now. He is looking like an absolute freaking stud.
I got Lamar Jackson, so I'm not worried about it. Although, if I didn't have Lamar, I would feel a little bit worse. I'd feel even worse if I didn't have a young replacement for him because Lamar's getting up there, 28 years old. Shocking. Top 10 oldest quarterback starter in the league right now, which is kind of crazy to think about. But I have Caleb Williams on my bench, so I'm feeling pretty okay. I don't need multiple bites at the apple necessarily. But I drafted Drake May in the second round of our rookie draft last year. Get a first round pick for him in 2026. I don't feel bad about it. This isn't my dynasty rebuild, so sorry. But yeah, I think one of the immediate things that you could try to do here, right, is hey, Sam Darnold, notoriously a very fast starter in the very first few weeks of the season. See what Sam Darnold does in the first 4 or 5 weeks. If he's killing it in Seattle, which I think there's a pretty realistic possibility for that, especially given their schedule early on, then try and trade him. I think there'll definitely be teams that are like, shoot, I had Tua go down, or oh, hey, I had one of these other brittle quarterbacks go down. I need a replacement. I think there's a pretty decent shot that you could trade Sam Darnold for pretty decent compensation, whether that's a young player or a pick. What do you think of that, Jake?
I do really like that. And going along with that, with the Darnold thing, like I mentioned, I also have JSN. So if Darnold's going off early on, then that means JSN likely is as well. So that's good for the fantasy team. And I do like the idea of moving off Darnold because kind of like James said, he kind of droppable depending on how he plays. So if I could get something for him early on when he's playing well, that would be awesome.
Yeah. One of the other things that James and I kind of always talk about is knowing where you're at and being realistic with your position. Realistically, right now, you need to determine which mode you're in. And I think it's fair to say we all know you're in a rebuild mode, right? It's not a retool. You're obviously not competing. No offense. Things can change quickly, but no offense. You're probably not at that level yet. So knowing exactly where you're at is a very enviable position because you know exactly how to act. And I think there's a pretty decent shot for you to be able to turn this around very quickly with some of these rebuild type moves. You know, if we were looking at, hey, if we had to compare this to an NBA team, you're probably in like the Washington Wizards phase, right? Where you have some good pieces, but we're only winning 20% of our games in a given season. We need to kind of get back to being a competing franchise. So, quarterback, I think we're pretty clear on. I think Love is probably going to start for you for a majority of the season. I'm still very high on Michael Penix, so I think that there's a decent shot that he ends up being a top 10 quarterback at some point. But you having a couple dart throws here is not bad by any means. My immediate thought, though, whenever I opened up your roster, was looking at the running backs. I was like, this might be the worst group of running backs I've ever seen in my entire life. What were your thoughts just looking at this group?
Like I say, I couldn't believe that, like I mentioned, that David Montgomery's probably my best running back. And, he gets a lot of touchdowns, but that can be kind of volatile. And so that made me really nervous. And then Tajay Spears, again, probably the second best, but he is injured right now. And then obviously sharing the workload with Tony Pollard. And then even a guy like, who's my next best one? Maybe Tank Bigsby. There's rumors between him and ETN, like who's going to be the number one back, but he doesn't have much uh, upside in the passing game, so that really hurts his production. And then who else do I have? I mean, I got Jerome Ford in a trade, and if he's probably maybe third or fourth best running back, and that's not great. I do have Trey Benson. Kind of interested to see what he might be in a couple years with James Conner getting up there in age. They seem to really like him. He's really athletic, but again, that's just a dart throw, and who knows how that'll turn out. But yeah, the running back situation is not good at all.
Yeah, it's volatile. You're all over the place with your running backs. A couple of them could end up being kind of okay in timeshares, and then a couple of them are, just hey, long-term plays to see if they end up doing something at the tail end of their rookie contract. They're all names that I like. Like I think all the dudes that you have here have a level of talent. It's just a whether of how much volume they're going to realistically get in this very first year that you're doing of your dynasty league. I look immediately at Trey Benson as someone that I really like, but also we don't know what he's going to do. And we have Jonathan Gannon, the coach of the Arizona Cardinals, saying that he's going to split time 50-50 with James Conner. And then James literally watched me in real time fall for misinformation on Twitter, where someone said that it was a Trey Benson catch for a touchdown for like 60 yards or whatever. We look at the back of the jersey. It's literally Imari DiMercado. Like it wasn't even Trey Benson. I fell for it. I felt like the mom falling for the AI buddies on the trampoline. I was like, I'm so stupid. Like I need to do my own research. So he's really tough to be able to properly scale, but I think it allows for a very fun opportunity because that offensive line is really good in Arizona this year. And I think realistically, you want to have a share of something in that Arizona offense this season because I think it could be actually pretty explosive. James, what's your favorite running back on the roster right now?
I mean, it's the people we haven't talked about. It'd be Caleb Johnson or RJ Harvey. I love that you got Johnson at the 110 spot. I think we've already talked about him. He's easily someone that could just take over that backfield by week 8 of this season. I looked at this running back roster. I don't think David Montgomery's value gets any higher than it is right now because Jahmyr Gibbs might legit go off for a 2,000 yards from scrimmage season where Monty never sees the field again. If you can get any kind of draft comp, I would be trying to get that for Monty. If you could get any draft comp for Tank or, I mean, like literally, I mean, the way I'm looking at it, especially the way this construction is set up, when it's heavy wide receiver and flex, I tend to lean pretty hard into wide receivers, especially if this is PPR. I might roster like 3 running backs, right? Your 2 new rookies, pick 1, maybe 2 other RBs, and then just try to trade off the other guys because you're going to want draft capital to go hit the next draft pretty hard on wide receiver.
Yeah. I think that you called exactly the right guys, right? RJ Harvey with that whole Denver Broncos backfield. Nobody knows what's going to happen with it. So just having a couple of shares of it is not a bad feeling by any means. I think it's very interesting because they're already getting more reps because we have J.K. Dobbins signing there. Doesn't have his helmet on correctly. He has the wrong helmet or whatever. The first preseason game doesn't get the start, and RJ Harvey does instead. And we get some more Audric Estime minutes as well. I'm a big Estime guy, so I think holding on to him for a year or two longer is to see what happens in that Sean Payton offense. And Sean Payton also loves to get a bunch of different guys. We always see a committee type approach whenever it comes to a Denver, specifically Sean Payton offense. So I think that is really solid. And then, I mean, you could even point to Ford, Jeremy Ford, Jerome Ford, how you pronounce it. Junkins just doing dumb shit, like it makes him more valuable just off the rip immediately. So that is incredibly interesting. And then early returns are saying that right now Jalen Warren in Pittsburgh is kind of getting a little bit ahead of Caleb Johnson, but I'm like, give that 6 weeks. 6, 7 weeks into the season, we'll probably see a bit of a reversal. Oh my gosh, Caleb Johnson didn't get a 50-yard reception right off the bat. Oh my gosh, the sky's falling, whatever. He did it against Nebraska. He can do it against NFL offenses. I have a lot of faith in Caleb Johnson this upcoming season.
I think a cheeky move you could do, Zahn, is take someone like Montgomery and go find a really buy low candidate like a Rashad White who still has some amount of upside just by being in a good offense, but then get Rashad White plus a late first or an early second round pick. So then that way you still have your running back slot filled right now. Rashad could very easily have a better season than Monty, but I don't think like Monty's value could never be higher. Rashad's value could never be lower because all anyone's talking about is Bucky and how Bucky ended last year. Rashad White's still going to get 40% of the touches in the Bucks offense, and that's not a bad offense to get a lot of touches. Like that's the kind of things you have to do to at least show you're putting effort in this season, but then also just build up draft capital for the next couple of years.
Yeah, I had the same takeaway too. Maybe a little less on the veteran side. I immediately worry about your running back timeline a little bit because like RJ Harvey's already 24 years old. Like he's kind of on the older side. So you kind of, that was a takeaway from here is just kind of consider age a little bit whenever you start looking at some of these players. But I think going to last year's NFL draft and taking some of those underrated running backs from that group could be a good way for you to target some of these dudes, some of the guys that just didn't do a whole lot. A la Sky Moore, 0 receptions for 0 yards last year. What are we doing? I think like a guy like Jalen Wright makes a lot of sense right behind A-Chain. Will Shipley has been in camp the number 2 running back right behind Saquon. If he gets hurt, he could be really awesome. 4th rounder last year. And Ray Davis, the backup for James Cook, who just signed an extension. He's back on the roster. He'll be in there. But Ray Davis looked awesome. One start last year, had 140 plus rushing yards right off the bat. Plus backup kicker Ray Davis. Can't get mad about that. So I think targeting some of those underrated dudes that didn't have an awesome rookie season, but could be really great in their sophomore year might be a good way to get some good value. How you feeling about the running back room, Jake?
Yeah, I mean, that was one thing that I was going to mention. I'm glad James did. The draft was something that I'm going to hope is going to help me out. That was part of the trade that I had made that I mentioned with Herbert and Trey McBride, that I also got a 1st round pick. So it was right before where my pick was. So I got to go back to back because I was kind of trying to decide whether I wanted to go with RJ Harvey or Caleb Johnson. So that made it pretty easy, trying to go get both just in case, maybe even just if one of them works out, but hopefully both do. But that was kind of the way I was looking at it. Like you mentioned, trying to get younger. Because again, Montgomery getting older, and then with the timeshare with Gibbs, it's just probably
Yeah.
probably about need to move on with him. And so
There's a
looking
poss
forward.
there's a possibility of Montgomery's injury being long-standing too. There's been that kind of rumor floating around from Dan Campbell. I guess we could kind of transition to this draft that you are going through right now with your rookie draft. Um, Weird elephant in the room with it. It's a slow rookie draft, James. We've gone through the 1st round. Jake just sniped Caleb Johnson from me, dick. And we're in a weird spot right now where the draft is paused because it's a long draft. It is a slow draft, right? So people can take as long as they want. We have had someone take 3 days to make their pick, James. It's
He picked
just
while we were
rookies.
playing. He picked while we were recording.
Oh, did he? What I hate. Guess who it was, James? Nick freaking Duncan, man. Nick
Oh,
Duncan,
Duncan.
ruining my life. Oh my gosh. He doesn't listen to this pod, so I'm not too worried about him hearing this. But gosh dang it, Nick. Pick faster. Like, I know it's funny and everything. I've been there. I've done that before. But it's not funny because I want to figure this out. Jake, you also have the 205 and you also have the 306 in this draft. Who are some of the guys that you're thinking about targeting at this point?
That was kind of what I was looking forward to. He just took Jaden Higgins, and that was kind of one of the guys I was thinking about because, kind of like James mentioned, I think wide receiver may be something to target going forward, especially having gotten running back twice in the 1st round. So there's still Trey Harris available. Jack Beck was probably the next best one. Maybe Kyle Williams on the Patriots. I've heard good things with him. But also Colson Loveland's still on the board right now. But again, that there's a lot of mouths to feed in that Chicago offense. But going for the future, that may not be a bad route going forward. So I think probably either Loveland or maybe Trey Harris. I'm not super sold on Scatabo, so Sleeper has him as the second best guy available, but I'm not so sure there. Jaden Blue, another guy, is a Texas fan. I like him, but he's kind of a all or nothing type guy. He can hit a home run, but otherwise there's not a whole lot there.
Yeah, I think that's a great thing to call out is I don't really ever love the rookie valuations from Sleeper. I remember last year there being like some crazy like Ricky Pearsall going like top 10 out of all rookies or whatever. And it's like, what are we doing here? Like obviously getting shot changes a lot of the calculus there, but at the same time he still didn't have an awesome rookie season, was not very good in college either. So that was very strange. I would advise going against Trey Harris. I would not look his direction. He is rivaling only Quentin Johnson in terms of overall drops in the preseason right now. So doesn't look like good early returns for the rookie out of Ole Miss in that LA offense. James, do you think you can sell Jake on taking Scatterbo?
I mean, the one thing because I've been kind of actually high on Cam is the fact that the Giants' entire coaching staff is coaching for their life right now. When you have that going on, you have no problem just giving the ball to the guy with the most heart, and I feel like that has to be Scatabo on that team. After watching his performance in the playoffs, I could see him being truly a do-it-all kind of guy for this team and just getting a lot of weird touchdowns, a lot of just 3 yards in a cloud of dust type yards. Not the home run hitter, but he could kind of fall ass backwards into like 14 points a game. I think maybe get him with your 306, though. I think your 205, you should probably take the best receiver available.
Yeah, they were talking about this on the Rieger Fantasy Football Show, but I think it's true. It's like the Giants are not all that invested in Tyrone Tracy. Like he is RB1 in New York, but it's like if they wanted to just not go his direction this year, which they really didn't in the back half of the season last year, there's no reason why they don't. And they drafted Scatterbo pretty highly. They have been talking him up in camp. He's getting RB2 snaps right now. Very likely in my mind that he ends up being the RB1 sooner rather than later in New York. I think realistically, if you want him, you're going to have to take him at 205. I won't take him because I don't want to be a dick. I'm literally on the clock right now. But I definitely like the idea of doing like a Scatterbo. You called out Jadon Blue. I think that he could be really solid in Dallas. Right now, they're saying that realistically, they don't know any clue who's going to end up being the RB1. The conventional wisdom has been Javonte Williams, but they've also been mixing in some Miles Sanders in there, Jadon Blue, of course, little Deuce Vaughn, a little throwback Thursday, if you will. So that's kind of all over the place. One guy I would definitely avoid, though. James and I were talking about this in person the other day. It's Jack Beck out of TCU for Las Vegas. He is not getting a lot of snaps in preseason from what I've seen. It's actually been Dante Thornton Jr., my guy, out of Tennessee, 6'4", 220-pound monster out of Tennessee. He's been getting the wide receiver two snaps, opposite of what's his face? Myers,
Kobe.
Jacoby Myers, thank you. Patriots boy. He's been getting the wide receiver two snaps, which is really impressive for a fourth round rookie. But after you look at his measurables, once you start looking at his speed and how much he tests, how well he tests, it's a no-brainer that he's up there. So there's some pitfalls I feel like in the second and third round for you to avoid, but that kind of leads up to being able to pick some of these other guys. I think another guy that works out a lot very well for you, especially at that 305, is maybe a Mason Taylor, tight end out of New York. He in camp so far and through preseason early on has been very involved in the offense, and there is not an obvious wide receiver two in New York right now, which kind of segues us into your tight ends. Jake, what are your general vibes on your tight ends going into this season?
Yeah, hopeful, I would say, because like I mentioned, traded away Trey McBride as part of the deal to acquire Worthy and a couple other things, including that first round draft pick. So obviously Trey McBride's pretty reliable and put up great numbers despite barely even getting any touchdowns. So that's pretty impressive. But I've got a guy like Tucker Kraft who has shown promise and could be more involved in the offense going forward. And then even got guys more low floor or no high floor, sorry, like a K Dot. I mean, he's going to get receptions. Probably never going to put up great numbers, but if I have to put him in and just to get a little bit of numbers from tight end, that's fine. Brenton Strange out of Jacksonville. I hear some good things. I hear some bad things. So hard to know there. And then got Isaiah Likely, obviously, kind of like I mentioned, he could be a home run type guy like he did in week one, just go off and then much the rest of the year not do a whole lot. So a good amount of volatility from the tight end position, but I'm kind of thinking Tucker Kraft could have a pretty good floor, and then obviously Kate Otten if everything just goes to shit.
Yeah. People forget how good Tucker Kraft was in that first couple of months for the Packers last year. He was like tight end two because we had a bunch of tight ends last year just have those really slow starts and then have really, really strong finishes. One of which was Mark Andrews, who kind of ended up blocking Isaiah Likely going towards the back half of the season last year. Mark Andrews went like 8 straight weeks with a touchdown or something insane. Now, it was a very strange year where poor start to the season, awesome middle of the season, and then he drops the potential game-winning touchdown against the Buffalo Bills. So Mandrew's having a strange year. James, do you think that this might be a Brenton Strange breakout year now that we don't have Ingram in Jacksonville?
Not really. I don't know. I mean, I think that the tough part with the tight end situation is I'm sad you traded McBride away. That's kind of like a young piece to build around. Um, if you got like the 104, 105 for him, sure. The 110 or the 109, I'm not sure which pick you got. Makes me a little bit sad, but we're not here to nitpick that. I think you're right. I think Kraft is kind of just like locked into your tight end spot until someone else proves themselves to be more reliable. I mean, he's kind of just the top guy in this group. I would say I want to make one point before we get too far away. Don't sleep on Jalen Noel with your second round pick. Everyone's kind of thinking of Jaden Higgins in Houston, but he kind of prototypes like Nico Collins, and Nico Collins is the better version of those two. Jalen Noel is kind of competing with Tank Dell, the guy that shattered his femur all of 6 months ago. Like Tank Dell might never play another snap, and Jalen Noel kind of slots right into all those targets that have been vacated. So that's the kind of guy that, especially in the second round. I mean, this is all crapshoot at this point. It's not like the first 12 good rookies. He's someone that could, I think, really impress you and maybe help lift this roster sooner rather than later.
Agreed. And I don't think there's anything wrong with swinging at some of these more ready to go players either, because the other awkward elephant in the room is I own your 2026 first round pick. So it's like there's no point in tanking this season. You
That's
actually,
brutal.
yeah, you don't have any 2026 picks as of right
Wait, how did
now.
that happen? Why
Um,
does this team have no 2026s?
I think the guy who had your team prior was just like really in on 2024, but as soon as I traded for Lamar, it was kind of curtains at that point. Like my team was just a little too beastly in order to overcome. I kind of ran the table with the year this past year. It kind of was the fruition of a bunch of different things that ultimately led to me dominating. So sorry about it, buddy. Tough. I don't really remember what that trade was now that I'm looking back on it. I'm going to have to go through the history to see exactly what caused me to get that first
I
round
thought it was
pick.
a typo. I feel pretty bad for Zahn seeing he has
No,
no 26s. So yeah, you're going to need to start getting some 2026 youth in here. Otherwise, you're going to have a really weird gap here.
yeah, playing for 2027. Going back to the tight ends briefly, I think that Brenton Strange could actually be pretty good this year. Like he is primarily a blocking guy, but like no more Ingram. He was a high draft pick, like a mid-second round pick for the Jacksonville Jaguars. He just like doesn't get a ton of run. It would not shock me to see him being a little bit better than you would expect. Definitely can be dropped this season if you're going to be doing a little bit of clearing house. If someone has a slow start, don't hesitate to cut anybody sort of thing. But yeah, he's okay. I think maybe better than the average bear because it gives you something excited to be about potentially at the tight end position because it's gonna be a weird year for you for sure. Wide receivers. I think this is your strongest position by far. Very young, very talented, and also just kind of long term. I think that a lot of these guys make a lot of sense. Who would you consider like your number one receiver on the roster?
I think it's probably got to be JSN. I like Cortland Sutton. He's obviously probably the one in Denver, but I just don't feel great about him. And he's also getting up there in age a little bit. I like JMO, but can be a little volatile at times. But he's been improving year by year in terms of his route tree and everything like that. The trust that the Lions have in him. But JSN, he's just I think going to be a target guy for Sam Darnold. I mean, I can't really think of any. I mean, he'll probably target Cooper Kupp a little bit, but and MBS maybe on some deep shots. But I think JSN's going to be his kind of go-to guy in terms of the target share there. And so I think JSN's probably the top guy that I'm looking forward to for this year.
Yeah. A lot of boom and bust guys outside of Jason as well. I think he's going to be the most reliable guy that you have on the roster for sure. None of these guys outside of Cortland Sutton track to be all that old very quickly. These are all kind of long-term pieces. James, you wrote in our notes that trading Sutton probably should be a priority. What do you think that is a realistic trade for Cortland Sutton? Who's someone that Jake should target?
I think it might have to be draft compensation. Honestly, I'd be trying to get someone that's going to have like pick 108 through 10 that's trying to win right now, or even like an early second rounder. He's just old is the only downside, but he should have a lot of. I mean, he's going to get you points until you get him off your roster. That's not the end of the world. It's just like you don't want to trade JSN. He's a top 20 dynasty asset. JMO's such a hard to value piece. I would try to trade him. I just don't know who to or how. Again, I would just go with draft pick, like anyone that you're getting rid of draft picks, but JSN and Worthy are kind of your guys that aren't moving anywhere just because of their age.
Yeah. And I think you're 100% right on the Sutton call. He's probably at the peak of his value, had his best season this past season, 1,000+ yards, was awesome in that Denver offense. And I just think there's a pretty decent likelihood that the Broncos fall back to earth a little bit. Jake, I'm sure you'd love to see that as a Chiefs fan. And there's a decent possibility we have a bit of a sophomore slump out of Bo Nix as well. So we might need to kind of strike while it's hot for that market right now. I think exactly what James is saying is very smart. Get that draft compensation, and if you could sneak in a receiver, a young guy as well. Just looking back to that 2024 NFL draft once again, maybe getting someone who didn't do a whole lot, maybe like a Jalen Polk, not actually Jalen Polk, more like an Adonai Mitchell, perhaps, or a Malachi Corley, guys that showed promise but didn't do a whole lot last year, but maybe have a little bit more run this upcoming season. I think could make a lot of sense. Just don't do Javon Baker because he's ass, as James knows. Oh man, that 2024 NFL draft for the Patriots, unreal. Another guy I really like for you here too, undervalued, is Rashid Shaheed. Dude is a per game monster. I had him in our Rogersville league last year. Dude, he is such a deep threat. It's unfunny until he like fractured every bone in his body last year. He is a speedster. Like he only gets one catch for 100 yards, but I mean that's still a ton of points, you know? Gotta be excited about that, right?
Absolutely. Like you mentioned, there's a lot of guys who could be some big home run hitters, and I think Shahid's kind of the epitome of that. But guys even like Worthy and JMO can get a big deep shot for a lot of points, but then they could also get you a big goose egg. So something to bet on the high ceiling there, but also could be a pretty low floor.
Yeah. What do you think the worthy ceiling is realistic as a Chiefs fan and a fantasy manager of his? What are you expecting out of Xavier Worthy long term? What's his comp?
Ooh, comp.
Is it Dwayne Bowe on steroids?
I think if he could reach his ceiling, obviously that's a lofty ceiling, but I could see a Deshaun Jackson type of guy.
Yeah.
Again, very lofty, but he has potential for it. Now, obviously, I'm biased. Like James said, the whole trade I really wanted Worthy, and so getting rid of McBride was a little hard. But as a Texas fan and a Chiefs fan, I just really wanted Worthy. I see the upside in him, but I also can understand the negatives he has. But I think highest ceiling he could get, I think it could be a Deshaun Jackson type guy, and that's somebody that I think would be pretty valuable.
Yeah, I think the thing that people forget with Xavier Worthy is that he had 2 touchdowns in his very first game. Like, that is actually insane. That's more touchdowns than Sky Moore has had in his entire career. That's 3 whole years of production that Xavier Worthy packed into one singular game. It was obviously garbage time, but like he had 2 touchdowns in the Super Bowl. He had 100 receiving yards in the Super Bowl. Like, no young receiver is realistically doing that in their very first season, unless they have some level of like future promise, not to mention just by proxy of having Patrick Mahomes in the offense just automatically raises that floor in a lot of ways. And Matt Nagy can't keep getting away with it, right? Like at some point, the man's got to get fired, and that offense is going to take off to back to historical levels. So I love the bet on Xavier Worthy a lot. Jake, we're down to the last few minutes here. Any questions that you have outstanding for us?
I think one of the biggest things, just dynasty wise, is the picks. Like that's something that's new to me. So how do you value picks in terms of, especially because like we mentioned, I have nothing for next year. So how does the value change in terms of in the future compared to like a first round pick now compared to next year, even 27, and then just in terms of evaluations, like what level of player should I be looking to get or trade for a certain round pick type of thing.
I think the biggest takeaway I've had in Dynasty is people are going to throw like third round picks as like a pot sweetener on the end of a trade. Third round picks are awful, right? Like look at the guys left in the draft right now. How many of them are you actually keeping on your roster? And you guys are only halfway through the second round. Like there's so many guys that are just pure roster droppable, like I mean, just draft chaff that aren't going to make your team. So if you accumulate 4 third round picks because it like sweetened the pot, you're just going to be pissed off because you end up dropping half of them. So it's like first round picks are very valuable, early second are valuable. Then it starts really tailing off, especially because this isn't super flex. This is only a 10-man league. Like you need dogs on your team. You do not need depth on your team. And third round
Correct.
picks are like best case scenario, a depth piece because you're talking about wide receiver threes and, running back scraping by to hopefully get some PT. Like don't fall for that thing. And people are like, oh, but it could be anybody. It could be, the next Lad McConkey. It's like, yeah, that happens one time in 1,000. Like your third round picks do not turn into 1,500-yard receivers often.
Yeah. Unfortunately, half of those third round picks that you would draft are realistically just not going to be on rosters anymore because they're going to have 0 carries for 0 yards. And it's like, okay, I'm just cutting this guy. So I think that's very strong advice. Consolidating is very important, consolidating talent, especially at quarterback with it being a one quarterback league, 10 teams only in the entire league. Got to get those top dogs exactly as James was talking about. And then my last piece of advice is don't be afraid to start swinging for it. There's no point in going 0-12 every single season. So just try and start winning sooner rather than later. Maybe not this year. Obviously, we're in a rebuild mode, but maybe next year is worth trying at least. Well,
I'll make
cool.
a round of that.
Jake, my mom wanted me to tell you Happy Left-Handers Day or whatever it's called. It's a made-up holiday, but
No idea.
she just texted me while we were recording. She was thinking of you. So thanks for coming on, man. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on. I appreciate all the insight. I really needed it.
Of course.
Free content is golden, so we appreciate it.
Text me if you ever have questions. All
I
right.
will.
See
See
you
you,
guys.
everybody.
You guys.